Hello, I'm
Hello, how are you?
I'm Robin Hanson, and you are,
I am Jordan Stone.
and we're going to talk about very large scale, large risks, I guess.
Yep. Yep.
And you wrote an article about that a few months ago, and I've written things related to that before.
hmm
What large risk would you like to first call our attention to?
The one that I think about the most, and I think is the most scary, so I'll talk about that one first, is vacuum decay. And so that's the idea that the vacuum state of our universe, which you can think of as like the stage upon which all the fundamental
Wait,
physics.
wait. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. We
Okay.
are recording. Go ahead.
Oh, excellent. So that's like the stage upon which all the fundamental physics happens isn't stable, but metastable. And so what that means is there's a potentially more stable form of the vacuum state of our universe. And some really high energy experiment, we're talking about like solar system scale particle accelerators or something more massive than that, could push our vacuum state into this more stable version. And I think to quote Nick Bostrom on this one, that results in an expanding bubble at the speed of light that just changes all of fundamental physics. And so everything we recognize about our universe would
Right.
no longer be true.
But now, um, in order for this to happen, there has to be this trigger that happens at a certain energy level. That energy has to be above, say, the largest energy levels that any natural physical process produce,
Yeah,
but also low enough that our descendants could produce it. So there has to be some
yeah,
range in there, and then that has to be the range at which this is triggered.
yeah,
And then you also need some suicidal descendants who, like, even knowing
yeah,
this risk, they decide to do this anyway.
yeah,
And then there have to be enough descendants, some of whom eventually take the suicidal risk, right?
yeah. So
And
I
that
was
that seems pretty unlikely to me, all those combining all those assumptions, but it could happen.
yeah,
There isn't much we can do
yes.
about it, though, is there? Like,
I think there is. Uh, and I'll talk about the fact that it's unlikely. I agree. Like the early universe was like a lot denser than now, and so there would have been like much higher energy
right?
things going on, just because like all the particles were a lot closer together back then. And if vacuum decay didn't happen then it can't really happen now, right, in our universe. And so me and a few others decided we would interview some quantum physicists on this. And so we found 20 people who had posted or published on vacuum decay and had background in quantum theory. And we asked them what the probability of our vacuum being metastable is. And they came out with a value of 50%, which I think reflected a lot of uncertainty because the standard model of particle physics predicts that it's metastable, but also the standard model of particle physics might not actually be relevant to energy scales like that. And then a 19% chance that it's actually possible to induce vacuum decay, mainly because of what you mentioned of like, yeah, it has to be much higher than anything that's happened previously in our solar system, in our universe, sorry. So there might be, yeah, it might be impossible to do it. And then the other side of it is like, okay, if it is possible, let's say there is a 19% chance that it is, or let's say there is a 100% chance that it can happen. Like, who would actually do this, right? And so I think the probability of, say, humanity doing it, if we stayed in our solar system forever, is probably like extraordinarily low. Like, we're not gonna accidentally or intentionally destroy the whole universe, right, in some experiment. But like if you colonize another solar system and assume that they're like independent from us, they have their own governance system, they make their own decisions, then the probability doubles that vacuum decay will be induced, even if the probability is still extremely low. And then you can say, okay, right, what happens if we colonize the whole galaxy? We have hundreds of millions of different solar systems all acting independently, and any one of them could do this. Then the probability actually becomes like quite high. And so it's like if you got like a few people in a room with two buttons, one button kills you and one button gives you $1 million. Uh, and like they're labeled, you know which one's which. Then if you put five people in, no one's going to press that button. But if you put billions of people in, then like it's almost a
And
probabilistic
what do
certainty
you
that someone's going to
suggest we
press the left
consider
button.
doing about this? That is, as what I mean, Do you think we should just prevent expansion into the universe? Or, I mean, I mean,
Uh,
this seems like obviously if there are aliens out there, then
yeah,
they are
that's
likely to
another,
do it
yeah,
regardless of whether we do it, right? So,
yeah, that's right. It seems,
and I would think our best estimates are that there are aliens out there. So this would just be a prediction for how the universe ends that
yeah, it
is
does seem
independent
that
of us,
like if this is true, if like vacuum decay is only one of like potentially lots of different ways that you could end the whole universe or end like galactic civilization at least. And so, right, if aliens exist, then I think the probability of us lasting for billions of years is probably like quite low, if what I'm saying previously is true.
right?
Uh, and there's not much we can do about that because we have no control
Right.
over what
So,
they do.
what would you suggest we consider
You,
doing?
so what we should do is put in some sort of governance structure that expands with humanity throughout the whole universe. And so what you do is you make these different star systems correlated under one similar governance structure rather than being lots of different independent actors that could do a thing. You have one system that is connected under a very similar governance structure that I think would have to be a super intelligent AI that's able to like observe everything and be able to identify if one of these galactic scale existential risks is going to occur. So this is like von Neumann probes is another one, strange matter, like other weird fundamental alterations, like that sort of
Well,
thing.
you're going to create a risk by this central governance, right? So
Yeah,
it's a trade-off
exactly.
of the risk you create versus the risk you're trying to solve.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a really hard problem.
And
Like,
one of the risks you create with the central governance is that it could commit suicide,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
If the central governance ever decides to commit suicide at any moment, then it can implement suicide, presumably.
Yeah, yeah, that it makes sense. Yeah, if it decides maybe that we've created like astronomical levels of suffering across the universe, and that might be one reason it decides, okay, let's end this thing because there's just so much suffering going on. I'm not really sure how that might happen. Maybe like we create digital worlds and we accidentally create too many digital sentient beings suffering or something like that, something really speculative. And they end up destroying all of that because that's like the best thing to do because there's just like it's so out of control. But that seems yeah, I think
You
there's
have to
just a
estimate the chances of each of these
yeah,
priorities, right? So,
yeah, exactly. So
how would you estimate the chance that there is this possible way for anyone in the universe to destroy it all versus that the central government and that there are no aliens
yes.
versus the scenario that you make a governance thing and that its risks
Yeah.
to realize.
I think like if you solve the governance thing on Earth, right, or at least in our solar system before we start expanding out throughout the universe, and we can get some certainty that like our governance system is really robust,
Well, how much
then
certainty would you need?
like
Like, like,
probably like if you're like 99% certain, I think that's a lot better than not putting it out there
well,
at all.
99% certain per what time period? Like, you're trying to put
Like
a
I think
bound
overall,
thing
because we would
forever
assume,
for an infinite future.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
okay, but how are you possibly going to get that level of certainty about a
yeah,
governance system?
I don't know. I don't know. I think it's a hard problem. And my like recommendation would be that we don't expand to other star systems really quickly without really taking some time to reflect and think about solving this problem properly. Because yeah, we
Well, we're
could
going to have plenty of
just
time before that thing is even possible. If we
yeah,
haven't solved it by then, what's the chance we will solve it after then, right? I mean, presumably,
yeah. I think
we will know a lot more in the next even 100 years about physics and whether this vacuum decay is even
yeah,
possible at what energies. You might think at the moment we're finally ready to expand to other stars, we will know vastly more than we know now. What's the
yeah.
chance that we will still need to study longer then?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. And I think it depends on like when do you think the point of no return is of like humans self-propagating throughout the universe.
Right.
So it
I would
could
I
be
would
the
put it as just
first,
when the first interstellar colonization colony leaves from the
yeah,
solar system. That's roughly
yeah, I
near
think that
then.
makes sense. But maybe it could be earlier. Like say one country or one company goes up into space and starts mining space resources and using the energy coming from the sun. Like we're only getting a tiny fraction of the energy that
Right.
is possible. And so one country or one company could have vastly greater access to resources than everyone else in the world. And so now only one entity has control over that long-term future. And so it's locked
right?
in a lot earlier than you would have like assumed
Well,
beforehand.
there's the moment at which the choice is made, and then maybe you think the moment at which it's locked in or something. But now you have to have a
Yeah.
model of like what does it mean not to be locked in terms of whose influence you're. I mean, there's a sense in which
Yeah.
maybe it's locked in now, right?
Yeah, maybe it could be. Yeah. And
I
so
mean,
should we trust just like one entity with the power to decide like how
well,
we
you are
expand into
trusting now.
space?
I mean, it might be locked in now, and there is just eventually going to be one entity. We don't know what it is, but like
Yeah.
you could create a
Yeah, I see.
global UN that rules the world, and now it's still one entity that decides, right?
Yeah, that
That
makes
is,
sense. Yeah. So
or it might be more likely if there's 10 entities that decide that any one of them decide, then it happens, right?
yeah, exactly. It's like there's a word, there's like a phrase for that. It's like just one person has to do a thing when even if most people don't think it's a good idea, if just one person does it,
Right.
then like it happens anyway, even if no one of most people thought it was a bad idea. So yeah, that could be a similar thing with interstellar travel, is like creating that colony where we're not ready, but like one person decides, yeah, I'm gonna do it, and
But
they
there's the
start.
opposite risk that we should expand, and this one entity decides to prevent it.
Yeah, yeah. And
You
then
have
we
to
could
weigh
be
that's
locked
the
in the
opposite
solar
risk,
system.
right?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And so yeah, that's we need to solve that. So I
Well, so maybe we should table this one and ask, are there any other scenarios that we should consider in a little more detail here besides this vacuum decay one? I mean, maybe we should collect
yeah,
several ones and then discuss how to deal with them all together.
yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, there's a let they get very speculative, right? Because we're talking about things that could happen like hundreds to thousands of years from now. Like physics is not at the stage yet where it can answer all of these solidly, right?
Well,
So
some of them seemed
starting,
less speculative to me. So you talked about the
yeah,
Berserker scenario, for
yeah,
example.
exactly, yeah.
I mean,
So
that's been a robust thing people have talked about for at least a half century,
yeah,
right? Uh,
so
so, but I would more interpret that as the risk that competition wins.
okay,
So you might say, in the past, everything that's been created around you, the world you're living in, is the result of competition. The things that you see are the winners of competition.
yeah,
And then you say, in the future, I'm afraid competition might win in the future because
mm.
the Berserker scenario is really just a scenario of competition where there's some winner of the competition. And you say,
So,
I'm afraid competition might still happen and somebody might win.
yeah, and so they self-replicate like faster than anyone
Yes?
else can replicate, and so they get to the solar system or every other star system
Yes,
faster than everyone
that's
else.
competition.
Yeah,
Self-replication
exactly.
is a
Yeah,
familiar kind
exactly.
of competition on Earth, it's not,
Yeah,
self-replication's been around for a long time on Earth. It has been
yeah, that
driving
makes sense.
the competition on Earth. If you
Yeah,
say, I'm worried about the risk that competition will win in the future, I'm going to go, well, that was my default.
yeah,
Of course,
I
competition was
see.
going to win in the future. What did you
Yeah,
think was going to happen otherwise? So I might now say, well, this seems to be a poorly specified competition. Another variation, you say there's, value loss because the future
mm.
creatures that competition will produce won't value the same things you value. And I
Yeah,
might say, well, that was pretty inevitable too. So now you're taking,
yeah,
on the one extreme, very unlikely physics extreme scenarios versus the most likely thing we thought was going to happen anyway. And you're going to call that the risk. Then that's a
yeah,
whole different discussion as far as I'm concerned. I'm saying you don't like the most likely scenario.
yeah,
You want us to do something about that. And I'm going to wonder, okay, what do you think you want to do about that exactly?
yeah. So I think we're assuming here that these von Neumann probes like aren't going to destroy everyone else. That you're doing this for your own benefit,
Well,
so you
they
can
they they
colonize, right?
could. I mean, that's the whole point. Different
Yeah,
versions would be created, and whichever one wins wins. And we don't know which one wins, but
yeah.
presumably the
But
winners will
someone
be the ones that
benefits.
have the most competitive strategy, right?
Yeah. But then you end up with like a galactic civilization that emerges, but just like the victor is the one in charge of that galactic
Well,
civilization.
yes, of course. That's how
Yeah.
competition works. Yes, the
Yes.
victor wins the competition.
Yes. And so what if there's a scenario where someone creates a von Neumann probe, a self-replicating machine that is just like totally destructive? So they do it by accident or they do it on purpose because of like just wanting to destroy everything. And so this is like a really unlikely scenario, but it becomes likely when you've got millions or billions
Well,
of like
only if you
civilizations.
think really destructive is the winning strategy. You don't have a good reason to think that, though. You're just, what if, right?
Yeah, I'm doing a what if. Like this is a I think it is
So, what if
unlikely.
competition, the winning strategy, is a mean thing? It's a really nasty, mean thing that wins competition.
Yeah.
What if? Okay, well, okay, what if? Like, what do you want to do about it exactly? You want to prevent competition somehow?
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, competition is always inevitable, isn't it?
Right,
And
if you might make like a central world government, but now you have competition over control for that government. What if whoever wins the competition for control over the central government is also nasty and mean
yeah. So
and
yeah,
ugly?
it's like
So that's another form of you're just changing the form of competition, right?
yeah, you could do it so you compete right from the beginning to put in place a governance system that can't be overthrown by future like civilizations that we
And
create in
isn't mean
space.
and ugly.
So yes, and isn't mean and ugly.
And how do
And
you make
so
sure that this one isn't mean and ugly?
yeah, I know it's a really hard question. I don't know. It's really hard. It's like I don't see any other way that you can stop something from happening across like a whole galactic civilization for like billions of years into the future, unless you have a super intelligent AI system that is able to
And
observe
even then,
everything
if
that
you have
happens and
aliens, you
prevent.
still don't win, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have to assume that aliens don't exist because
But
that's
but
just
that's
like
not very reasonable,
uncontrollable.
is it? I mean, I think it's quite over. I think it's quite likely that aliens do exist. It's quite unlikely that they don't.
Yeah, so we have to hope that they also implement a similar system. And so
But
there's
only
the
if all, they all have to implement this according to your
yeah, they
logic,
all
right?
yeah, they all have to. Yeah, otherwise
But
it seems like almost inevitable that one of these large scale risks will eventually occur.
or they don't exist,
And so
right?
or they don't exist. Yes, if they do exist, then yeah, they seem inevitable. So I would say I'm like 60 to 70% sure that they exist because I could name like six of them in total. And because I'm just so early in human history, it's like a Roman trying to predict like artificial intelligence risks in human civilization now. They wouldn't be able to name many of them at all. And so it's the
No, but
same
still,
now.
in the space of all possible things, you have this corner of the space. You have to have a whole bunch of assumptions be true for these risks to exist. So it's not obvious to me that they even do exist.
Yeah, yeah. So how likely would you say that do you think that they exist, other than just being
So
like
we're talking about,
completely
let's say,
uncertain?
vacuum decay. I mean, it just
Like,
seems to me
yeah,
quite
vacuum decay.
unlikely that vacuum decay, that is, nature has explored really high energies. And the high
Yeah,
energies that our descendants could explore don't seem to be a much larger range above that. Certainly the ones
yeah,
that they would. That is, even if it's logically possible for, say, a whole star system to organize all of its energy into creating one high energy event, that doesn't mean
yeah,
it like that seems really unlikely that the whole star system would put itself all together so as to try to trigger
yeah,
vacuum decay because it's going to create use the energy of an entire star to create this one maximal energy event. I
yeah.
mean,
I think it might be useful if I talk about like the full list of the ones that I think could destroy galactic civilization, like other than vacuum decay and berserkers.
well, if you have
And
others we should consider, then let's
yeah,
do
so
so.
if I briefly just like go through the full list and then we
Well,
can like
I don't think you should give a full list. You should give maybe the another two that you think are the most likely. If we have four, I think the four most likely seem to me enough. We don't
yeah,
really need to go through 20.
yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so two more are strange matter. And so this is something where you compress particles to such an extent that you get a more stable form of matter. And anything strange matter touches turns into strange matter as well. And
Right, but
so
the
it,
universe is pretty empty. So if a strange matter star would just sit there and slowly things would accumulate to it, but it's not going to go contaminate everything else, right?
I think it would quite like slowly, but like exponentially. So
Exponentially? Like, I mean,
yeah,
exponentially at a really low rate. Like when a whole
yeah.
nother star smashes into it, now there's a twice as big a star, but
But
like
you
that's a really low rate, isn't it?
when you create strange matter, you create strangelets, right? And these are like tiny little particles of strange matter that can travel through space. And they just have to hit one other thing, and that other thing turns into strange matter. And that releases other like small particles. And so it's true that like everything is really spread apart, but like eventually, like this sort of thing
Well,
can
as you
get
know,
really large and potentially out of
our
control.
best models have an exponential expansion rate for our universe. So this exponential rate needs to be
Yeah,
higher
yeah,
than that rate. Otherwise,
yeah.
it goes away, right?
Well, you're assuming here that the like the galactic civilization is moving away with it, but like presumably would like the galactic civilization would stay in that galaxy, right? For like forever or as long as they want. And so like that galaxy would stay together. And so that strange matter being created in one part of the galaxy or potentially in like multiple parts would eventually like start to spread
But now
out
you're talking
and
about a
destroy the
galaxy
larger
or
area.
galaxy cluster level risk. That is, you don't integrate over
Yeah.
the whole visible universe. You just integrate over the scale at which you think things will cluster and stay clustered. And then the risk
Yeah.
is that any one part of that cluster would infect the rest.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Well,
so
I mean,
it's
you have
one way
to,
to avoid some of these is just to go to multiple clusters as soon as we can.
yes, exactly. I mean, that is
Yeah.
feasible now, or will be feasible for the next few billion
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
It's also strange matter energy levels do seem to be in the range that have already been explored in the universe. It doesn't seem like
Yeah.
these are out of the range at which the universe has been probing already. So if strange matter has been feasible, it's probably already been created.
Yeah, I think that is likely as well. And maybe it is just like it's
It's
slow.
already out there, slowly
Yeah.
accumulating
Yeah.
more, slowly
Yeah, I'm
growing.
not sure if we would be able to detect it like so early, or it could be like trapped within neutron stars, like within their centers,
Right.
and
I
then it
mean,
could be
you
released.
also
Like we're
need to
still quite early in our universe,
for the
so
strange matter and the vacuum decay, you need to postulate that this new regime does not support life and civilization. That is, we can't just transfer our structures over into these new structures. There are no structures over there to transport. That is, strange matter doesn't support atoms and molecules and structures that could then embody information and computation, things like that. It has to be some,
yeah,
impoverished sort of regime that can't do those things.
yeah. I think if we were hit by strange matter, we would be destroyed, like because we rely
Sure,
on
but if we saw a
particles
strange
working
matter
the way.
star out there and we knew it was there, we could work over time to build things like us out of strange matter, inserting those things into the strange
Yeah,
matter, and then our civilization would continue within the strange matter.
yeah. That's a really interesting idea. Yeah, yeah. Maybe that's possible.
But that depends on whether the
Yeah,
strange matter has that as feasible. But
yeah,
again,
yeah.
you
I'm not
have to,
sure. I'm not a physicist.
sure, but you have to, I mean, so here you might say there's just a rate of things happening independent of humans or
Yeah.
civilization, right? This is just a way things could go wrong, but it's not a risk that's caused by our letting our descendants go out into the universe, unless they're
Yeah.
causing the strange matter.
I think it might be possible to create strange matter like artificially. And so you would increase like the probability of strange matter having been created. I'm not exactly sure how that would happen, but it seems to be like similar to vacuum decay, where you just like put like a huge amount of density in an area and like
Right.
break up the
But
particles.
again,
And
you
so
need people to choose to do that for
yeah.
some reason,
Yeah, and again
and a
I
large
say
enough
like this
chance
sort of
they'll
thing
choose
is
to do that. And
yeah, I say this thing is like it is really unlikely, right? That one civilization would do this. Like it's like 0.0001% chance
right.
that they would do this, right?
But the
But
rate of
then
expansion of
multiply that.
okay, but if you look at, say, the rate of expansion of vacuum decay, that's at the speed of light. But the rate of expansion
Yeah.
of strange matter is much, much slower,
Yeah.
vastly
Yeah, I'm a
slower.
lot less worried about strange matter. And
And
there
so,
might be some
a
ways to prevent
civilization
it
that's
from
expanding at
destroying
half the
you.
speed of light would run away from the strange matter, very fast, right? The strange matter problem would be left way behind in a civilization that's expanding, say.
Yeah. It would potentially destroy like a lot of the value that you could have within your galaxy if like it wasn't contained like really quickly. Like you could probably contain it with like gravitational waves because they won't physically interact with it. And so you might be able to protect yourself from it so it wouldn't like destroy everything. And
Okay,
so
so what's number
yeah.
four?
Number four is a bit of a fun one and it's time travel. So definitely it's not definitely impossible to time travel, right? I think there are like a
Well,
range of theories.
I mean, if
And
time travel is possible, then isn't it true that anybody anywhere in space-time could be here right now? So the Fermi question is much more stark. That is, where is
yeah,
everybody? We look around for aliens. They could have
yeah,
come from anywhere in space-time and they're to be here,
yeah,
but they're not
it's
here.
basically
So
multiplied, yeah.
doesn't that mean they're just probably not space time travel is probably not possible unless we
Yeah,
are just the only. I mean, we have to be the only civilization in the universe, and our future descendants have to not want to come here. Or
yeah,
somehow time travel only becomes possible when the term time machine is created. There are some theories like that.
yeah, it could be something like that
In which
where
case, there's not so much of a risk of creating a time machine, right?
yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Maybe time machine like it's probably not. the one I'm most concerned about. It's just if it is possible, then yeah, our galactic civilization could be destroyed before it was created. But it's probably not the case. That's like probably, yeah, quite unlikely on that one. I just want to say like that these are like super speculative, right? We're talking about things that's beyond the
right?
current standard model of particle physics. Like we just like physics can't predict whether or not these sorts of things are possible or not. And we don't even know potentially like what kind of questions we need to ask and what we need to focus on, where these galactic existential risks might arise. And so like I have a huge amount of uncertainty on whether or not it is possible to destroy a whole galaxy. There are so many things that are like really specific, that like fundamental constants, the way particles behave, all of this stuff that allows life to exist. And if any of those things could be changed at a large scale in the long-term future, then galactic existential risks are possible. And so,
Okay, but
uh,
let's step back. There's a high level. You're uncertain, but there's two channels here, right? There's the
yeah,
future of competition, right? Where we
yeah,
just let competition happen and reach, then decentralization happens and then decentralized behavior happens. There's the alternative
yeah,
scenario of concentrated control, right?
hmm
Where there's a single power, at least in our civilization, not among aliens, that
yeah,
rules our center. And then that has a whole nother set of risks that result from it.
yeah.
And I presume you are enormously uncertain about which of these two approaches is the better one.
Yeah, I mean, the best approach, I think, is to spend some time to figure it out before we expand throughout
But there's
the
risks with that
galaxy,
as
right?
well, right?
But
There's also
I
risks
don't
with
think
trying.
there's that much of a risk to like
You sure?
delaying.
Let's
Yeah,
talk. Let's walk through that then. Let's talk about the risk
yeah,
of delay. Okay. So
yeah,
first
sure.
of all, I mean, I don't see how delay happens without a center, a substantial center. That is, if the world is full of lots of separate parts, each of which is inclined to push ahead at whatever speed it's inclined to push ahead at,
Yeah,
if some parts of them choose to delay, the delay doesn't happen because the other parts don't delay, right?
yes. And
So
so
you need a central
delaying is,
coordination
yeah,
to produce a delay.
yeah. Or you just, I think you don't necessarily need central coordination, but maybe you get like AI that's like really intelligent. And so you expand the wisdom of society and people decide to opt into this reflection at like a large scale. So say we generate super intelligent AI and it's able to come up with really good reasoning and like really good arguments. And so people decide to like opt into this, or at least the vast
But
majority of people
I mean,
decide
they
to
could
vote
decide to go
for
the other way,
this.
decide not to, right?
Yeah, they could decide not to. Yeah, and so
Okay,
it's
so
not.
but you don't get
I
like
think
where
there are some scenarios where we could plausibly generate like something like a long reflection. I know you don't like that word, but we
I
could
don't care about the
plausibly.
word.
Okay, well, I've read something that you wrote that was
I mean,
against the
I
long
was
reflection idea.
skeptical about the concept, not the word.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so
Um,
I
so the
I just
question
think that
is,
like
it, in order to have a pause, we will have to have some central control to produce this pause. You're imagining central control could come from a whole bunch of AIs that agree together that they want that, but
no,
still they'll have to do it.
they wouldn't necessarily be the AIs that agree, but like humans agree based on the reasoning from the AIs.
Say
Some
we
sort of
have, we have 8 billion people now. Maybe we have a
yeah,
trillion creatures in a little while. How many of these trillion need to agree on this reflect pause for it to happen? What if 10
just
of them agree to say, no, I don't agree? Now what happens?
I think that we have democratic governments in lots of places, and so you
How
don't have
many?
to get yeah, well, you don't have to get everyone to agree, but just
Okay, but
like
if you have 100
all the
governments,
countries
you'll
that
need
are
them all. What if you
capable of
have,
it.
what if you have a
Yeah,
billion governments
not
that each
necessarily
have a
all, just the ones that
thousand
are,
people, right?
yeah,
Now you need all billion governments.
just the ones that have that capability to spread throughout the galaxy. And so at
Well,
the
within
moment, just like a
it
few
depends on how long the
countries have
pause
that.
is. How long a pause were you thinking? If the pause is like 1,000 years, then even something didn't
Yeah,
have the capability at the beginning of the pause, then they
I
might
think a
well.
thousand years is a long time. I'm not thinking 1,000 years. I'm thinking just at least until we've solved this problem. And I don't know how long it would take to do that. And I think plausibly
But you
it
don't even
could
know
be
this
solved
pro this
soon.
problem is solvable.
I don't know. I
Okay,
don't.
so you're just
So, like, yeah, I think, well, I would definitely have to come to some sort of decision, right? And solvable is defined by whatever, like, we've come to a decision and then we go. And that's like, I'm fine with that. As long as we make a decision and it's intentional, it's cautious. Like, I think So I
But
talk about this
we
stuff, and
like,
it's like,
but you
yeah.
need, in a sense, all powers above a substantial threshold to
Yeah.
agree, right?
The thing is, it's just like
That's the
this
center.
the scale of this problem, right? The moral implications of this are like just so astronomical that even if we believe that the probability of these galactic scale existential risks is really low, then like still just so important that we
But
approach this cautiously and we get it right.
but
And so even if
you're
a lot of
assuming there
reflection
aren't big
is
risks on the
really
other side of
hard,
this equation, right? Look, both paths have big risks.
yeah,
So not pausing has the risks of, a decentralized future where different centers do bad things.
yeah,
The centralized future also has substantial risks that the
yes,
center will be controlled by powers that
yeah,
then make bad decisions about what to do with the center.
yeah, I see what you mean.
That's also a as serious a risk.
So we have to choose one. And
And
I,
delay requires the center. So I'm saying
yeah. So which one would you choose?
I will choose the decentralized approach is is where I would lean.
Yeah.
Uh,
And so if galactic existential risks are possible, then the probability that they will be initiated in the future is like will be very high because it will
so
be
I would
decentralized.
just say our history. I mean, if you just say where are we in terms of our history,
Yeah.
our our world has been decentralized for 4 billion years of life.
Yeah.
And slowly over the last centuries and thousands of years, humans have learned to make larger units of coordination.
Hmm.
But organisms are in a sense a unit of coordination above cells.
Yeah.
So and then there's work groups and species. So biology has been experimenting with units of coordination for a long time,
Yes.
and humans have been on the frontier of expanding our experimentation with units of coordination.
Hmm.
But in the past, all of these units have been much smaller than the scale of the biosphere,
Yes.
so that the main way that quality control happens for them is that when they decay, they are replaced by other units. So natural selection has been our main quality control for units. And
Yeah.
that's even true today among humans, like firms. Quality control of firms is basically if they decay, they get replaced by new firms. And
Okay. What do you
um,
mean by firms? Sorry.
capitalist for-profit enterprises, business enterprises,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, in any one firm, there are people who are trying to manage that firm and design it and choose its structures. But in fact,
Yeah.
they consistently just die
Yeah.
because they decay internally, and even the people at the top can't prevent that. Yet we keep getting new and overall better firms because of natural selection, of
I
cultural
see.
selection, basically. So our producing and improving units has been embedded within a larger competitive process.
Yeah.
We've never been able to make a coordinating unit whose quality wasn't generated and managed by that larger embedded natural selection process.
Yeah.
So, but your hypothetical central governance requires that you create a structure and that it's unique and that it doesn't face any competition and that its internal decay is not fixed by natural selection. It's now fixed
Yeah.
by some new process, as yet unknown and undemonstrated, by
Yeah. Yeah.
which it
Yeah.
can prevent its internal decay and repair its failures and persist over very long durations.
Yeah. And so it seems to me like although this thing seems, yeah, really hard and totally unprecedented, it seems like the essential thing that would have to be in place if we are to allow humanity to expand throughout the universe and to survive for billions of years as we would like hope they would. And so
Only
these
if
are the
these risks are
conditions
severe,
required.
right? Only if
Yeah.
these risks you imagine are severe, like vacuum decay.
Yeah.
But I think they're not very likely. So I think even if you don't do anything about these risks,
Yeah.
we're quite likely to just, you know, go on and not go extinct. But if you think, the competitors winning is a risk,
Yeah.
well, now I say that's very large. So it all depends on whether,
Yeah.
to what extent do you think
Like
natural selection competition, that the winners are going to be something you don't like, and you would rather have a governance that, uh, you know, prevented that.
Yeah. I think even if the risks are like really unlikely to be real, let's say they're like 5% chance that these galactic scale existential risks are actually real, then it's still very important that we put something in place to like make sure they don't occur if they are real.
Only if
Because
the
like,
cost of doing so is less than that 5%.
yeah.
But that's a
And
real
so
question, whether the
do you,
costs are less than that
yeah,
5%.
yeah, it's interesting. And so like, is there a way to figure out this problem without having a centralized system? And you say no.
Well, I would say, look, so here's my default proposal, and now you can tell me what goes wrong. If
Yeah,
we continue to develop and test and practice larger governance, which is
yeah,
what humanity has been doing, we will slowly see its increasing capabilities
yeah,
for internal repair and maintenance, and see to what extent these systems can maintain and improve themselves in the absence of selection,
yeah.
or
That's-
to the extent we can use less selection and other means as a substitute for selection to
Yeah,
maintain their quality. We will slowly over time just see how good we can make governance. And then when we reach
yeah.
these key
So this,
moments of decision, when you think it's time to pause, then we can ask, are our governance institutions up to this task?
yeah,
And then that's the point at which you'd make that judgment. But you don't need to make it now,
yeah,
but you
yeah.
do
That's
need
fair.
to create some process for tracking when are we near the point where we should be making this decision about
Yeah, and
whether
it's
to
really hard to
trust a
tell.
central governance to manage a pause, first of all,
Yeah,
or if
and it
that's the
would.
first thing that happens, and then a
Yeah,
manage an expansion if that's the next thing that happens.
yeah. I think it's important. Maybe it's useful to think about the conditions like under which we could prevent like large scale existential risk from ever being created. And maybe they don't necessarily imply that you have to have like something like an authoritarian central government. And so maybe like you need something that's able to observe everything, right? So that, or at least observe things at the scale large enough to initiate something that could destroy everyone,
This is
right?
called minarchy, i.e.,
Yeah,
what's a minimal government
yeah,
structure that you
exactly.
could create.
And then
And
maybe
there
it
is a
doesn't,
large literature on what is,
yeah,
or what would be the minimal structures of
yeah,
governance. And many people who have advocated for governance have advocated for modest, limited government, of course, over a
yeah.
long history.
And so maybe it doesn't have to have the authoritarian power to stop them from doing that, but maybe it just shouts really loudly. It sends signals in every direction in space if someone starts doing something that is extremely dangerous to the whole galactic civilization. And so that way you don't need that central government that has the authoritarian vibes that could like make things go very badly.
Well,
And so
so
there seems like
we call that norms.
right.
So in our society, for example, if you would learn that your neighbor was developing a nuclear bomb in their basement, neighborhood norms would come in to try to discourage that. That doesn't require a central world government. It's just decentralized norms. But you
Yeah.
do then have to wonder, how much variation are there in norms. So there are many norms for
Yeah.
which, for example, like we have norms against stealing, against
Yeah.
robbery, but then there are supposedly neighborhoods where they don't have so much norm against that, at least if you steal outside the neighborhood. And
Yeah.
then
I
the
think
question is,
space
can
is
the rest of us enforce these norms to be wide enough spread?
yeah. I think if you have like a surveillance system that is able to work across the whole galaxy. But the thing is, space is very different to Earth, right? You could hide quite easily in space
Yes, of
and
course.
do a large scale thing. So you have to intentionally implement that surveillance to make sure that the norms are enforced in like whatever way that they are. And so
Well,
it
if you,
won't
if you
happen
need to,
naturally. So you need to have that
well,
interference right from the
either the
beginning that
norms
goes with
enforce the
everything.
surveillance, or you have some more centralized, perhaps minimal government to enforce the surveillance, but you'll have to
Yeah.
ask what enforces the surveillance.
Yes. Well, other people would be that's my proposal right now, which is the limited version, is that you have that like really intentional surveillance that is able to see basically everything that could relate to these large scale risks or like other risks of astronomical suffering, like really like bad things that you don't want to do, like create millions of
Right?
sentient beings. Like that
I
would be
mean,
another thing that it would
but you should
usually look
trade
for.
off against the cost of surveillance. That is, surveillance makes it easier for norms to suppress many kinds of things, not just the things you don't like. Okay.
Yeah, that's
So we
true.
might wonder
And so,
what norms might evolve that would suppress good things
yeah, and
because
I
of
feel like there
the
needs to be an
transparency you're
international
trying to
dialogue.
create, right?
Yeah, and like at some point before we start interstellar travel, we need to decide this
Well, we
because
have the
once you start
conversation,
going to
we've had a
other
conversation
planets,
for a long
we
time
spread.
about privacy in our world, right?
Yeah,
I mean, the main trade-off on privacy is that when you allow more privacy, it's harder to enforce norms and laws about behavior that's hidden.
yeah,
That's been the main
it's
trade-off for a long time about privacy. And over the last half century, people have leaned more toward privacy, I think, even though technology has moved the other way.
yeah. So
We have, in fact, less privacy now, but the sympathy for privacy is higher.
yeah, yeah, I guess that makes sense. So there's like far from an international consensus on how much privacy we should be allowed. And so it would be useful to like open up those dialogues and make sure that we have that consensus, or at least like some
But
sort of
but what
like
if one, say Portugal
internationally
decides to deviate and
approved
everybody,
decision.
what if everybody else has lots of
Yeah,
transparency, but Portugal decides to go strong privacy? How unhappy
yeah, it
are
only
you that there's this
matters.
one large area that has lots of privacy?
Yeah, it only matters that the most powerful country or company that has the ability to spread throughout the galaxy or initiate that spread, like agrees to the international
But it
consensus.
might be that
And it's,
Portugal becomes so capable,
yeah,
if you start. So
yeah, it could
how big
happen.
a
I feel
thing are
like
you going to insist that it share this global consensus?
I think if you try and initiate a global consensus, then the likelihood is that that will be followed, right? Like international norms can be very strong. You get the international scrutiny if you go against those international norms. And so not necessarily for the most powerful country, actually. If you've expanded into space and you've got the
Well,
space resources and the space solar, then maybe you don't care what anyone
so
else thinks because
so
you got the most power.
I think you're pointing to something that often is neglected here. People tend to imagine either decentralized competition or a central government,
Yeah,
but in fact we have a central norms. That is, our world today has a central community with shared norms without a central government. And that
yeah,
centralized community with shared norms is producing a lot of correlated behavior worldwide, but
yeah,
it's also reducing a lot of variation and experimentation in the world. That is,
yeah,
um, because our whole world, say, shares this community, like even if we have 100 different countries, we don't have 100 independent policy experiments. We often
yeah,
have all of these 100 companies basically doing the same sort of policies,
yeah.
causing,
And so,
that us not to really know very much whether that's the best policy because we don't see many variations on it.
yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, maybe we can get better at that in the future when we have like more powerful simulations. Or if we spread to Mars, maybe we can try out new governance structures there. And so it's plausibly like more likely that we'll develop better governance structures soon.
So,
Yeah.
as you may know or not, I have a proposal for an alternatives governance structure that I put out 25 years ago and is now finally undergoing some experimentation
Oh, really? I'm
called
not familiar.
futarchy, or
Okay.
decision markets. And
Yeah.
the slogan is vote on values, but bet on beliefs. And I do think it has a decent chance of being a much more competent form of governance. That is actually just, if you give it a goal, it's just much more effective at actually achieving that goal than our existing forms of governance.
Hmm.
So, under that thing, you'd have to ask what goal would you want to hand this form of governance if you wanted to deal with these problems? So, how would you specify the goal? Whatever,
Yeah.
however you do that, it will do a very good job of pursuing that goal, but it will pursue the goal you specified, not some other goal.
Hmm. That's really interesting. So
But
yeah,
I'm
something like
still
that.
wary about
Yeah.
empowering governments or powers when they are not very competent and they
Yeah.
are more easily grabbed by competitive powers who want to grab a central power and use it for their advantage. Um,
Yeah.
I'm more, I'm relatively worried about that, so that at the moment, I don't see governance competent enough that I'd want to empower a central government.
Yeah.
But
No, that
if
makes
we
sense.
if we demonstrate more competent governance, then I might change my mind about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it relates back to, yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty. And it just seems like my main like takeaway would be like there's just so much uncertainty about the consequences of spreading to other star systems and like what that might mean for the long-term future. And that has just like astronomical moral importance. And so making sure that we do that cautiously in a way that is reflective and forward thinking and like international as a community, then the higher the probability that we'll like end up with a great long-term future and not one that's short or full of suffering.
Right, but I fear that your mental framing here is there's a problem out there, then there's us, the government here, that thinks
Yeah.
about it and solves that problem out there and implements our
Well,
solution.
we're the seed for that whole galactic
Right, but
civilization, right?
this government might not be we. Once you empower it, it's not you or I, it's this thing other than you or I. And
Yeah, it's a seed that we've created.
it could come and slap us.
Yes.
It could hurt us. That is, when you create a powerful government, it's out of your control,
Yeah.
and you have to worry about what it will do. You might have created it because you wanted it to solve
Yeah.
some other problems, but it doesn't
Yeah, that's
have to
fair.
do that with its power. It could use it for other purposes.
Yeah. It's possible we could create something that we see as robust and aligned and like we can be confident that it would not destroy us before we create it.
So,
But
so
I'm not
I
sure
want to
like
emphasize this point that strange matter or vacuum decay I find as pretty unlikely and speculative. But if you are saying that something like berserkers or value decay are also risks, I think those are not speculative, but overwhelmingly likely.
okay,
I
well
think
yeah.
it's overwhelmingly likely that competition will lead to things that or win the competition that to some degree you don't like. That because that's how it's always been in the past, basically. We have a
Yeah.
long history of competition, and it just quite typically leads to things that previous people might not have liked. That is,
Yeah.
we're at the moment a winner of competition, but we know that our ancestors wouldn't have liked that much a lot of things about who we are and what we're like. And so we can just
Yeah.
pretty reliably predict that if competition continues, the things that win it will also be many things we now don't like. But the
Yeah.
question
I
is,
think we
if
could
you
like
create a central power, that doesn't change this problem or this phenomena. That now competition just happens as competition for control over the central power, and it still will have changes over time in what you like. So whatever wins the competition for control over the central power, you'll also won't like.
yeah.
I don't
That's
think you have a good reason to
that's a
think that
hard
if you
problem.
create a central power, you will like it, the result of its competition more than if you don't.
I think at the absolute minimum you need to create something that okay, you can't like say what a future galactic civilization will value, right? But you can at least assume that it will want to not be destroyed by itself, right? And so you can create at least something that intentionally makes sure that like these
But
galactic existential risks can't
right, but
happen in the
that's for
future.
things like the vacuum decay and the strange matter, right?
But that's I
So
think von Neumann probes griefers as well have
no,
like
I'd say von Neumann probes are just a whole different kind of thing. That's where the winners are things you don't like. That's the problem with von Neumann probes. There's a competition to make reproduce, and whatever wins, you don't like it. That's a
yeah,
robust thing, I predict. And
but
this,
maybe no one wins like with
but
nuclear holocaust, like
galactic
no one wins there.
civilization doesn't necessarily want to prevent a competition where something wins. You're assuming that a galactic civilization will want to prevent that. It's just not obvious to me.
Would want to prevent something where someone wins.
Von Neumann
But I'm
probes,
saying
I
as in that
say,
there's a chance that one star system or like a group of star systems creates von Neumann probes that
yes.
spread out and just like are not like selective. They just destroy everything, right? And so this is
They
like it
conquer and
seems
replace everything with themselves,
yeah, and
which
these
is
things
how
don't have aren't
competitive
sentient. They
life
don't
has
have
happened all through
value.
history, right? That's how
Yeah,
life has had that competition for 4 billion years so far, right?
but these von
Different
Neumann probes
species evolve and they
wouldn't be
replace the
sentient.
other ones.
Yeah, they wouldn't be sentient beings. And so, as far
How
as
do you
I'm
know?
concerned,
How do you know they're not sentient?
well, I'm assuming in this scenario that they're not,
But you shouldn't
because
assume
they
that. You should
wouldn't
just
definitely be sentient.
no, but you should assume you don't know. But I
Yeah,
say again, I don't think a galactic civilization is going to coordinate to prevent a competition where something wins. That's, you see, when you phrase it that way, galactic civilization, all civilizations in the past have encompassed competitions where some things inside them have competed against others and typically won. That's how
Yeah,
past civilizations have happened.
yeah. But in the galactic civilization, it's totally different. You don't have coordination at that scale. Like they can't communicate with each other in real time. There's like potentially hundreds or thousands of years of delay between communication between different
Right?
star
That's an
systems.
obstacle to coordination, but it doesn't mean coordination can't happen.
Yeah, I think it's a lot harder. I would agree that it's a
Sure.
lot harder to communicate.
Right.
And
But
so like the
but
same
you were
dynamics
saying
won't continue exactly the same way.
you sounded like you were trying to make a robustness argument for the existence of a central governance, saying surely any galactic civilization would want to coordinate to prevent certain kinds of things going wrong.
Yeah,
And I
and the
would
only
say
way to
vacuum decay and strange matter are the kinds of things they might want to coordinate to prevent wrong, not having a competition where somebody wins the competition.
yeah, I'm not worried about like I'm not saying that that's the thing we need to worry about. My assumption I think that we're differing on is that I think that von Neumann probes could destroy a galactic civilization.
They could
Like
replace
if
it.
with von Neumann probes.
Yes.
With like yeah, and that would
But
that as
that's
far
not,
as I'm concerned, that is destroyed. There's like no
but
sentient
just
beings
because
left.
that's how you see it doesn't mean that's how a galactic civilization will see it.
Yeah, I think it's fairly safe to assume that no more sentient life existing in the galaxy is bad.
But you're assuming that somehow non-sentience wins the competition. I think we're
Yeah, if
often
you're
willing to
creating
allow
self-replicating
competitions,
machines.
right? But I just don't think that's very likely, first of all. And secondly, I just don't think people are willing to ba basically. So think of how we regulate competition in, say, movies or something, right?
Yeah,
Like a censorship board says, okay, you guys can compete to make movies, but none of them can be anti-patriotic. Only patriotic movies are allowed to be presented to the public, right? And then they're
right.
saying, because we all agree, surely, that only patriotic movies should be supported, and no movie should be allowed that presents a bad image of marriage, because marriage is important. So we want to make sure all the movies support marriage, right?
Right.
So you could create a consensus in a country that we need a censorship regime to make sure all the movies that get competed all satisfy certain constraints. But often
Yeah.
people say, no, we don't want those constraints on our movies.
Yeah.
We want an open competition. And yes, there's the risk that movies that win the competition might be anti-marriage or anti-patriotic, but we think that risk is more okay. And I think similarly, if you say it's possible that the von Neumann primes will win the Galactic competition, people might say that's an acceptable risk compared to the constraint you're going to try to make of some central regulation to make sure everything that's in a competition is properly sentient or has the right kind of sentience or something. That sounds like a pretty hard thing to regulate.
Yeah, I agree that it's a very hard thing to regulate. But like I think that it's imperative that we do regulate that. Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about things that could destroy like all sentient, like all value. Everything I value is sentient, right? Sentientism. I value everything that is sentient, and I don't value a universe
But
devoid of life,
how
right?
much do you think everybody agrees on what's valuable? That is, you're appealing to some shared concept of value that we all
Yeah,
are going
we
to
have
agree
to.
on.
I think we have to make some assumptions when we expand throughout the universe, right? About what is valuable, because it's just so important that we make sure we get it right. And so we can't just let it happen in its default way, I don't think.
I'm trying to get you to see that there's a choice here. That is,
Yeah,
we could in fact let it happen, or we could not. We have to consider that choice.
yeah,
And on the one hand, if we did agree about what we wanted to stop, and by coordinating we could stop it, that's a benefit of creating the central power. On the other
yeah,
hand, the less we agree about things and the more we risk that if we create this center of power, one of us will take control of it and the rest of us won't get that control. And then they will
yeah,
use it to propagate and promote themselves,
yeah.
right? That could be just as bad as the thing we were trying to prevent winning the galactic competition through this central coordination.
Yeah, I can see that it could go badly if we tried to create a central government. Like, I'm not necessarily saying that that is like the definite thing that we should do. I'm just like that is an example of a way you could prevent these galactic scale existential risks from happening in the long-term future by making sure that something like that goes with the interstellar travel missions.
Right.
And so the most important thing is that we reflect and that we do choose a path, right?
Uh, Let me suggest a different most important thing, which is
Okay.
before these decisions are out of our hands and too late. The most important thing is to think about how how good are our best forms of governance and how badly could they go wrong, and to try to
Yeah.
develop better forms of governance between now and then. That is,
Yeah.
if we will soon, I don't know, within a century or 1,000 years, face a key choice whether or not to create a central governance,
Yeah.
then the most important question is to get a better handle on the risks and possible payoffs of that choice. And
Yeah.
I would say even more important is just to generate better options in that space. The
Yeah.
we between now and then we could actually just develop better forms of governance
I see what you mean.
and
So
then
maybe
have
we
better
don't.
choices to make, options to
Yeah.
choose from.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So we don't necessarily have to wait. I'm not saying we wait. I mean, by saying we wait, I'm saying that we don't spread throughout the galaxy as fast as we can, but we take time to figure out those forms of governance that would work for a galactic civilization, right?
Right, but we can't
So,
wait without implementing some sort of central governance. That's the problem.
yeah,
Either people leave whenever they feel like it, or there's some central norm or governance that restrains them. And then we have to ask,
uh,
do we want to create that central norm or governance that restrains them? And then that's the point at which we risk all the things that could go wrong with that.
yeah. I don't agree that we necessarily need a central form of governance to like have at least enough time to reflect on these problems. Like like international scrutiny can be really powerful, like if there's an international consensus. Like people aren't no one's intentionally contaminating Mars, for example, because there's a strong international consensus that Mars is like really valuable for scientific missions. So no
No,
one
but
has
that's not why.
contaminated it yet.
I mean, the main
Why is it?
reason people haven't contaminated Mars is just it's really expensive to. Nobody has had a strong enough commercial interest in doing so. But when the
No, I
interest
mean
is
like
strong, then that'll be a different issue.
people clean the rovers. Like there's strong like decontamination protocols, and they make
Right,
sure
but
that
those are
anything that goes
modest
to Mars is
expenses,
not.
so they don't mind paying modest expenses. Just, you know, running alcohol over your thing before you launch it is not that big an expense. I mean, if you think
Yeah,
about, say, the
uh,
oceans, right? Uh, you could make arguments for leaving the oceans alone, but we're not because there's all these fish out there and they're tasty and people like to collect them.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so they do, right? Regardless of whether there's some
yeah,
international consensus about whether we're overfishing or something, there's just people out there fishing.
yeah. I think it is possible though. Maybe Antarctica is a better example. Like we're not colonizing Antarctica, right? There's the
But
Antarctic Treaty,
if
but
people
also there's
wanted to, we would be, I think.
yeah, but who would want to go to an interstellar like who would want to do an interstellar travel mission? And so
I
there's
mean,
enough time.
Antarctica is more attractive as a place to colonize than
Yes, it
Mars at the
is, and
moment.
we haven't done that. So
But,
maybe like
well,
there
I mean,
could
we
be some
haven't colonized the
international
top of Mount
treaty.
Everest either, right? I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
but there's just lots of pretty hostile places in the world. That the reason we haven't done much there isn't that, we have a treaty against it. Like the middle of the Sahara,
Yeah, I
there's
think
lots
it's a
of people
combination of
out there in the middle of
factors.
the Sahara, but they'd be perfectly willing to do stuff. They just don't because it's just
But
hot
I'm
and
not sure,
sandy.
like,
And
no one's mining in Antarctica. Maybe there's some motivation to prospect Antarctica for resources, and no one's doing that. And so, like, I think there are small motivations to like launch an interstellar travel mission. You're not going to get your money
so
back, like
let
no
me
returns.
let me rephrase this.
And
To the extent that we have now a global something weaker than a global government, but in that direction through global norms and a shared global community, we are
mm,
now at risk of the problems that I worry about from
yeah,
a global government in the minor scale. So it's not like this is free. We could, in
yeah,
fact, be sliding down a slippery slope toward a central world government or community. And this is the current state of sliding down that slope. And we are at risk for this thing.
yeah,
Well, that is,
yeah.
and I would say you should worry more about how confident we could be that we should be so coordinated as we are at the global scale we are. I actually think we are making a mistake there. We are probably too globally integrated and coordinated.
Oh, really? That's interesting. Yeah, I think it's sad that it's going in the opposite direction. I think global coordination is extremely important now with like
But it's also
really
risky.
powerful
It's very
technologies.
risky. So
I think it's
uh,
very risky if we don't have like international coordination on
it's
developing like
very
really powerful
risky in both
technologies.
directions.
But like
But you
there
need to
needs to
see
be
the other
international
risks
agreement
as well.
on
That's the problem. I would be less concerned with people eager for taking advantage if they also saw the risks. If you only see the advantages, you don't see the risks, I worry that you're a little too eager.
For international governance.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But I see lots of technologies being developed, like the AI arms race at the moment between China and the USA, developing artificial intelligence technologies that could like have huge ramifications for humanity. If we had like a stronger international governance framework, then maybe we could prevent things like an AI arms race that could literally destroy
Well,
humanity.
let's turn it around. Nuclear power was developed well over a half a century ago, three-quarters of a century ago now, and the world has
Yeah,
largely not used it because of a global consensus that it's too dangerous. We,
yeah,
the people looking ahead from 1940 at the future of nuclear power imagined a much different world than we're in because they thought we would be using it all over the place, and we're not.
yeah.
So we have
Is that because of
basically mostly
international
given up
governance?
on nuclear power because of this global consensus to basically overregulate it.
I I was it was not my understanding that nuclear power was not used because of an international consensus. Like in France, they had like national protests against that, and they got rid of all their nuclear power plants, right? That wasn't because
Germany,
of
in
any
Germany, they did. France still
external
has all their
factors.
plants.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, Germany. Yeah, but that
Right,
wasn't
but
because of
so,
like
but
international.
no, we, in most regulatory areas, including
Yeah,
nuclear power, medical experiments, airline safety, banking, in most regulatory areas, most of the world does it the same because
yeah,
the regulators in each nation are part of a community of people who talk about that thing and they want to be respected by the other people in their community. And they less
yeah,
identify with their nation than they do the community of all nuclear regulators, all banking regulators, all medical regulators.
yeah,
Those communities exist around the world. So, for
yeah.
example, only one country in the world allows organ sales, which is
Right.
Iran. And the rest of the world hates this in medical ethics. And they're always getting together. How are we going to pressure Iran to stop being the deviant because they're allowing organ
Yeah,
sales, which shows you the strong global consensus about the ethics of organ sales. Even
yeah,
though there's all these independent countries, there is this convergence of opinion which censors deviation and
yeah,
makes it hard for there to be much experimentation. I'd say
yeah.
the
I do
same
see
thing
that.
happens in nuclear power. All the nuclear power regulators around the world are convergent in their being very cautious about allowing more nuclear power. And
Yeah,
that's why we have so little nuclear power.
yeah. I think international consensus can be wrong, like, of
Yes.
course, right? But that doesn't mean that it's wrong most of the time. Generally, I think having an
But
international consensus is valuable on
okay,
things like climate change, for example.
but the question is how much variance should we have in policy so that we have more experimentation? I'd say it's relatively clear we have just too little variance. It's fine to have our best
Yeah,
guess about what the best policy is, but to make everybody in the world follow that one best policy is a mistake because we're missing out on the
yeah,
learning opportunities of having different places try different things.
yeah. I do think there are some things though where it's like, okay, we can get things wrong and that's fine, but like in other areas, it's absolutely essential that people agree on something.
But
Like,
for example, it's not absolutely essential
not,
in nuclear power that we all agree on everything. People have
yeah, it's
decided
not
it
with
is, but
nuclear
it's just
power.
not.
I'm thinking mainly about existential risks to humanity.
Right, but I'm
Like
trying to
there
show you
needs to
we
be,
already overestimate how important it is to agree on things. If you look at outside of the things you're hoping for, just in other policy areas, we have too much convergence, too much conformity pressure to all do things the same all around the world in a wide range of policy areas.
yeah, maybe that is true in some cases. It's not my understanding that that's true everywhere and like in all
We're just
occasions.
trying to look overall on average what the typical
Yeah,
case is. I would say
okay,
start to
on
walk through some
average.
typical cases, and I would say you will see a lot of over convergence in the world. Say, take
Okay,
COVID, right? At the beginning of COVID in January 2020, the usual public health experts had their usual opinion about what to do. They said masks, we don't need them, travel restrictions, not a good idea. And then world elites all around took the next month to talk a lot about it. And after a month, they all came out with their new opinion about what to do, which included masks and travel restrictions. And then all the public health experts changed their mind and said, okay, fine, we're going to do it that way. And pretty much the whole world did it the same.
yeah,
It was, and I would say too much the same. That is, we should have had a little more variation of some places doing it different than others, but everybody
yeah,
wanted to be part of the global community and do what the consensus of the community was.
yeah. I see what you mean. I think it's an area that is not my area of expertise. I wouldn't be able to throw examples at you, I'm afraid.
Well, I
So
suggest you learn a little more about other regulation in the world and what happens when central powers choose to regulate things. How does that play out? Because the history of that isn't very encouraging, really, about what happens if we gave them even more
yeah,
power to make even more centralized decisions.
yeah. I mean, my understanding is that a lot of international coordination would have been a lot better. That's why we created the United Nations after World War II. Because if we'd been able to understand what everyone else in the world was thinking, like then it would have been more understanding and less misunderstandings and fewer wars.
Even fewer wars is a hard thing to. So here's a difficult fact. Over the last
Yeah,
10,000 years, war has been the main driver of cultural evolution and human technical and business improvement.
yeah,
So it's been at a great cost, of course. War was very destructive, but war has also been the main driver of innovation for 10,000 years.
yeah. That doesn't mean we want more wars.
Well, it means there's a high cost of
Yeah,
preventing more wars. So we do now have a world consensus against wars that's being tested somewhat by Russia and Ukraine,
yeah,
but still, we are plausibly going to have substantially less innovation as a result, and that's
yeah,
a thing to worry about.
yeah. I suppose. Like, yeah, I see that there are disadvantages to that, but like generally, if we're talking things on average, then it's better that there
Okay,
are fewer
well,
wars, right? Like you agree on that.
so I mean, at the highest level, I want you to think about two different processes for making decisions. Okay?
Yeah,
The oldest process is natural selection. It's
yes,
a robust process. It's been driving most change in the world for a very long time. Recently, human organizations have gotten larger, and inside human organizations, you have a different process where people sit around a table or whatever and they talk about what to do, and they offer arguments and they offer plans, and they make
yeah,
choices based on the arguments they give each other. That's a new process in the world for making decisions. So
yes,
far in, say, capitalism, it's mainly been disciplined by this larger natural selection process. The natural selection process decides who sits at the table, what things they're talking about, and what their options
yeah,
are, and then they make a few decisions, right?
yeah,
But I think you are enamored by this idea that we could extend this sitting around the table decision process to everything, or at least the most important
yeah,
governance choices
yeah.
we
I
all
mean,
have,
I'm talking about existential risk level stuff. Like that's really important that we
right?
have international coordination on.
But but how are we going to coordinate through the sitting around the table talking thing, right? That's the process
Yeah,
that you hope to bring to
yeah.
bear on existential risk.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we need to talk about more because obviously the situation we have isn't perfect now,
Okay, but it's the
and totally
talking,
like
but I
working
just want
towards
to
better
highlight
governance
for you that
systems.
you want this talking process to grow in importance and to be a bigger influence on civilization in the future compared to what it
I
has been in the past.
I want to ensure that it's able to spread with human civilization into the long-term future, like into space, not
And the
necessarily like grow in like power over people's lives, but just to make sure that it's able to spread and be everywhere, so
Okay,
that
but
it's able to
you
prevent
want
the
a
worst
few,
things from
okay,
happening.
but there's a
Doesn't
few
even,
key
yeah,
choices that instead of just having natural selection be the thing that makes it happen, you want this committee to be formed with powers to talk about it and do something different. And if they decide to do
yeah.
something different, you want that decision to have big effects on the world. Their decision is implemented.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of thing I'm thinking about, like in terms of the systems that we have at the moment, like the UN creates a working group and they get
Right?
inputs from
Yes,
countries from around the world and they produce a report, they get
exactly.
feedback, and then you
And
end up with
and you
a
need to
better
make an
system.
honest
At least
estimate.
there's something, some decision has been made
Right.
there,
And an
but it's
honest
better than
estimate should
nothing.
be made. How well do UN committees work? When you give a UN committee a
Yeah,
task and they talk about it and do something, how well does that turn out? That's a key question to ask here
pretty,
because that's what you want
yeah,
more of to have happen, right? You want more of that sort of thing.
yeah, pretty well sometimes. Like
Okay,
Action Team
sometimes, but
14
we
was a
need to
pretty
look
good
at the
one.
middle of the distribution. Okay, look at the whole distribution of outcomes and ask typically, how does that come out? That's the key question here.
Yeah. I think if we ask it at a point where like interstellar travel, like galactic civilization, no one stands to benefit right now in the world. And so if you ask that question and you come out with some sort of consensus, it's a lot less likely to be biased towards one particular country
Wait,
at
wait,
that
wait.
point, right?
You're saying
And so,
you're imagining two different committees. One committee has a pressing problem, a problem that the committee is immediately facing. They need to make a decision soon. There's lots of people in the world who care about it, who try to influence them and try to pressure them to make the decision they like. That's one scenario.
yeah,
The
that's
second
one. Yeah.
scenario is where it's decades in advance of this problem. There's a committee formed to
Yeah.
think about the problem well before the problem. It's not an immediate problem, and most of the world doesn't even know they're thinking about it. And then that committee now makes a decision. You say, I think that second committee makes a better decision. Isn't that what you're saying?
I think it's, I don't think those are the only two options. I think you could do it a lot closer to the time when you have more information, but not necessarily with urgency.
You pick something along the spectrum. We had two endpoints here. You
Yeah.
could pick something in the middle, but you're saying there's a
Yeah.
point in the middle of the spectrum that you think makes a better decision than this last endpoint where it's a pressing decision, right?
Yeah. It seems to me that if you have a situation where lots of people, like countries from around the world, are a lot more biased and like it's urgent and
Interested
they're
isn't the
involved
same
in
as
it,
biased,
then
but
okay, well,
I would
interesting.
challenge you to like collect a data set and see if it's in fact true. When a committee thinks about things well in advance before there is the immediate pressing decision, that they make better decisions. I'm not sure that they do.
Okay.
But
I don't know.
right, but the highest level point is like I'm saying, look, you want to trust governance to make good decisions. I'm saying governance has often gone badly. We need to worry about that. So on the higher level, I
Yeah.
want you to just see the trade-off. You're choosing among different approaches. They both have downsides, and you need to honestly estimate the upside and the downside before making that choice. And the second is the meta
Yeah.
issue. If we could just make much better governance decisions, this trade-off would be a lot
Yeah.
better, right? And if we have some
Yeah, I
time
see.
now
Yeah.
between these decisions to be made, that's what we should be doing. The highest priority would be let's just get ourselves some better governance institutions.
Yeah. Yeah. Whether those be decentralized or central.
Just generate a range of options, better
Like,
range of options than we
yeah,
have now.
yeah, yeah, you're open to all sorts of potential ways. Like, yeah, I mean, if it's decentralized and it's able to prevent large scale terrible things like existential risks on Earth or the long term future stuff, like whether it's centralized or decentralized, like whichever one works better. And I agree, like, yeah, let's spend some time figuring out what the best governance system would be.
Well, I think we should end roughly soon here.
Yeah.
You have a last word? Is
That's
something last you want to say or?
yeah, I'd just say that like it's really important to think about these problems like way in advance. Like humanity's future in space is super important, and we shouldn't rush into it. We should have these kinds of discussions, and we should figure out what the best possible approach is because it's so important that we do.
I would modify that to say we should explore more distant future to look for the pivotal decisions that we might make now that would influence it. So we should, for the
Yeah,
most part, we should let the future take care of itself. But we should search to see are there things now that have unusual influence of the future, and then we can pay extra attention to those things. If we don't find something in that category, just let the future deal with itself. But if we can find things now that have unusual leverage, then yes, please, let's do those now.
awesome.
All right. Um, till we talk again.
Yeah, great to chat.